Welcome back to Cirrius Talk. I'm Greg Banks. Over the last several months, we've gone from big AI headlines to MCPs to security to deployment concerns, even cost comparisons of custom build versus out-of-the-box solutions. Today, we're getting brass tacks, local agents, and how they can drive real productivity inside your organization without turning everything into the Wild West. Joining me again are Tim and Gavin, and in this episode, we'll pull back the curtain on what we're actually using day-to-day here at Cirrius Solutions. Thanks for spending time with us. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back. Tim and Gavin, good to have you guys here today.
Yeah, good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, good to be back.
I've just been thinking about this one the last couple of days with this episode. It's an exciting topic. I know Tim has got dozens, if not 100 hours into some of the prep for today's content, but it was kind of taking me on a journey thinking back to some of our earlier episodes on this series at the highest level, kind of talking AI headlines. There was just so much going on 6-8 months ago. And we've been trying to steadily break this material into smaller and smaller pieces so anybody who listens can have real useful things to take back to your teams to help them out. We talked at the highest level about the headlines, as I said. We got into MCPs. We've talked about security, concerns on deployment, when to do things, when not to do things. But today's topic is getting pretty brass tacks. If you just really want to do something with AI, who does not want to be more efficient, right? So we're going to talk about local agents, how you can increase productivity. But even within that, there's a lot of things that you got to think about, talk about, things to consider. And what we basically done is made a use case of an agent that we've built, the collective we, not Greg, but these things that are making us more efficient, giving us more consistent outputs, those kinds of things. So really looking forward to unfolding this today. I've heard about our agent, haven't got to lay hands on it yet, but some good stuff. So Tim, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg. And kind of what we're hoping to do today is peel the onion back even a little bit deeper than what we've done in past episodes with some really specific examples of like what we're actually using within our own company at Cirrius Solutions on a day-to-day basis. So we've provided a lot of vignettes of kind of things that we've done for various client work in the past. But today we're really focusing on like what are we actually doing within our own company and what are some things that we've learned as we've rolled out what we're calling our Cirrius Ops Agent, which is our locally based employee agent. We're going to have multiple agents across our business. But, we talked around local versus cloud agents. This is our employee productivity agent that we're rolling out. It's really across the company. And so starting first, I think one of the things, that's at its core is the concept of transforming our business from an SOPs driven business to a skills driven business. And so really defining what are the skills, the repeatable things that we're doing multiple times throughout our organization and putting those into formats that aren't just human readable and executable, but also agent readable and executable. So it's all about building a human agent collaboration canvas or framework for your business where everybody's executing kind of off the same processes in the same steps, and it's documented across your business. It's repeatable, it's scalable, and it's maintainable. So we've learned quite a few things along the way here. And obviously skills are nothing new. We've talked about it quite a bit before, what they are and why they're so critical. But maybe it makes sense to just really quick, Gavin, you want to just touch on, just to review for the audience in case they haven't listened to any of the previous episodes, kind of what are we talking about when we say skills and why are they making such a big deal right now across so many different businesses and why should we care about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So last week, like you said, we talked about unlocking the power of local agents, which goes a little bit beyond some of the agent discussions that we've seen so far. A lot of local agents for companies are going to live on someone's computer and run at a baseline off of a program such as Claude Code or Codex. Those are really the two big ones on the market. So those programs out of the box, really, really capable on what they're able to deliver. But when you think as a business unit, you want to be thinking, how are my employees going to be leveraging Claude Code? How are they going to be leveraging Codex on a day-to-day basis? And how can I tailor these tools specific to my business process? And that's really where skills come in. So it's just a set of instructions that utilizes supporting context to accomplish a specific task. That way, when you're interacting with your tool, it understands that it can leverage a skill in order to make some sort of change or push some sort of workflow. But there is a really big challenge that we're facing today, I think a lot of companies are facing as they roll out some of these agents, is they're realizing, one, these tools are way more powerful than what we anticipated, and they go well beyond the developer's scope. I think that's really important if you're a new listener diving into AI tools, is these kind of local tools. We're seeing more unlocks at a reporting level, at a task management level, as much as we are at a development level of being able to write code, I would say. So the problem that a lot of people have been running into is, okay, when we utilize these tools, when we give them to an employee, we have some employees that are taking them to a really big extreme and optimizing their workflows, and maybe some where we're seeing that they're not quite being utilized to their full potential. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that there's a way to tailor your Claude Code instance or Codex instance to be streamlined across your company. And identifying what skills should be streamlined company skills and what skills you want your individuals to continue to pursue is that's a real big challenge right now for a lot of people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you have to have a framework or some type of methodology on how to approach it, because you are literally building what can be, if you do it right, kind of the backbone of your business or operations for your business. It can be multiple things. It can be executing. It can also be your source for SOPs for humans to query. How do you do this? It can replace your centers of excellences. It's a lot of different things it can do. So it's really important. So you need to approach it with some type of logic, with some type of framework. So we'll give one of those methods to prevent your migration over to skills from just becoming the Wild West. And I think that was one of our lessons learned early on with that. And I think two quick call outs is, we said Claude Code and Codex, but skills are quickly becoming the lingua franca, let's say, of agents across the board. And so, kind of almost regardless of what type of agent or framework, it's probably using skills or something similar to skills. And the framework we're talking about applies to almost any type of agent that you're trying to roll out across multiple employees in terms of a governance structure for skills that your agents can use across your organization. Kind of before we jump into the governance structure, I think additionally, we'll just kind of talk around like what are some of the skills that we currently have right now? And just to give people a taste, we say skills and it's like, okay, great. What does skills actually mean? And so, we'll share kind of a list of the skills that we currently have deployed. We have about 27 skills active in our Cirrius Ops agent now. That's growing weekly as we vet and actually use our governance structure now to input more skills that we can deploy either at the department or company-wide level or at the individual level. We'll get into that here a little bit. And so, it really kind of runs the gamut. We kind of have our skills bucketed into kind of a few different I'd say areas, in terms of skills. One is just around like notes management, whether, we're using, on computer program called Obsidian. It just is a renderer for Markdown. There's multiple different programs that do similar things, but it's just think of it as a file, a neat renderer for files, Markdown files on your computer. And so we have a lot of different skills related to how we want our employees to organize their notes, how we want them to organize project statuses, how we want them to capture notes, providing them easy ways to capture things onto the computer. So everybody's having an organized way to organize their Vault notes. So we have an Obsidian Read Vault, Obsidian Meeting Note, Obsidian Project Notes, Obsidian Project Status. All of these are around helping you organize files or notes on your computer so you don't just get this massive sprawl where you don't know how to find your stuff and the agent doesn't know how to find your stuff. The next I would say be a next level up, still around organizing your Vault, but more around kind of structured activities that need to happen periodically to curate your context on your computer. So we have what's called a weekly review skill. It does a weekly memory compaction and self-improvement where the agent actually goes and looks at the activities you did throughout the week. It looks at all the different areas you have in your notes. It identifies what's stale, what's not stale, curates that, logs memories, and then provides you kind of a reflection review for the week for employees. So it's a good way to kind of step back and look, and for the agent to help self-improve. Then there's tasks and task management. Everybody has tasks. We use ClickUp for our task management for client-facing projects, and then we use our Markdown Vault or Obsidian Vault with our Cirrius Ops agent just for individual task management for things before we want employees to log things into ClickUp, where it would actually be something ready to put as a formal task update to a project. So we have like a task writing task, a task execution skill. Then we actually have the ClickUp workspace management skill for actually taking those individual updates and pushing those to ClickUp. So we could go on and on. That's an example of a few of those. We have communication skills. So each employee can kind of tailor how their agent writes. It's in their own style. We have content and document skills, development skills, skill creation skills. So skills are actually being created in a certain format. So everything's following a similar format across the business. So that just kind of gives a little bit of taste of what we have in terms of kind of skill structures, or in terms of skills that we're using right now. But wanted to kind of share that up front just so people have an idea of what we're talking about. There's a lot more you can do with skills. And again, I didn't give an exhaustive list here. We'll share kind of a more detailed piece when we share the notes out with this episode. But next then is taking that and say, okay, we have all these skills. How do we actually control and have some sense of governance over what skills we're actually adopting as a company versus what we're not adopting as a company? And how do we balance centralized control of skills as a company so we're doing things in a certain way to improve our customer experience, to ensure high quality, but also providing some level of individuals or some level of freedom for individuals to tailor their employee agents to them? Because we found that's actually one of the biggest unlocks of having local employee agents is you're able, people are really adopting these because they can tailor it to their specific thing. If I'm an engagement manager on one project, I have a lot of parallels, maybe 90% parallel to other engagement managers, but that extra 10% freedom, that's how I like doing my job. Areas where the company allows me to have preferences, and I want to create additional skills to that. So how do you balance that and enable both of those? So we've come up kind of with a three-tiered governance structure. And again, there's a lot of different frameworks and structures that you can find coming out now. So this kind of synthesizes a few of the frameworks that we found really valuable and what we found working. And so Gavin, maybe you want to walk through kind of what are we viewing as kind of our governance structure right now for skills to kind of bring some order to the Wild West and kind of provide that balance of centralized control versus individual freedom.
Yeah, well, I'll say from a government structure point of view, anybody who is leveraging our ops agent has the capability of going in and making their own skills. So whenever they're looking at a specific thing that they're doing, a workflow that they're doing as an individual, maybe this is something that I think in our use case, most of the time, it's something that is being done experimentally. So we're trying out new services. Obviously, Cloud Code is very new to us. That's what we build a lot of our platforms off of. So it's go in, mess around, see what works for you in your workflow. That's where building skills is really valuable individually. And then what we do is we say, once you have your skill locally, push it to a repo. And that repo is then viewed and analyzed by really a dev team or a team of developers that understands what's being built by the skill. They're going to evaluate a couple different things. The first thing that they're going to evaluate is just for central security. So are there things within the skill that's being written that could expose, if we were to spread this out across other individuals, security risks? Kind of interesting breakpoint there, because it's, even though you're able to build the skill locally, you have an independent team that's responsible for making sure that if there's something wrong, some exposure, you're not exposing it to the rest of the company. And then we can always give feedback to the individual. Hey, you need to change this about your skill before we can publish this. And if you get through that break point, then typically what we see is you can then share the skill if you want to with individuals, because we do see that, individual skills, even if you're working in small teams, if you're a smaller company, maybe you'll only have a couple people in your sales team as an example of this, then that may mean that they share skills that don't necessarily need to be surfaced up to the rest of the company. The second thing, though, they're going to evaluate once you get past that first gate of, yes, you could share this with other individuals, is this something we need to just incorporate into the baseline ops agent? And so some things we look for there when we're evaluating team skills. Is this something that is repeatable across other people's workspace? So if this is something that touches the way that we interact with our PM tool, would be a good example, then that's probably something that we would really consider to a skill that we would consider making cross-platform. Additionally, I would say you've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but skills are the entry point to tool usage. We've talked about that previously. So if it's connected to an external tool, so the skill says this is how you use the external tool, that typically brings it up on the consideration list to bring it to the rest of the company, especially if that external tool is being used by the rest of the company. So that's something we keep in mind. Additionally, I think a big thing for us is, do we have a process around it? That's the biggest gap I truly believe people are facing with skills. You might be able to sit down as an individual and say, this is how I do my reporting. But when it surfaces up to the company level, we might need to say, is that how we do our reporting? And maybe we don't have a process for reporting, whatever it is we're reporting on. So that is always something as well that we need to analyze when thinking about incorporating it into the larger.
Yeah, I think a really key principle to keep in mind is when you're building skills, you've got to be output focused. What is the output that's needed from that skill that then a person or an agent can then take and either execute with or hand off to the next set of skills of the next agent to do? And so with that, you got to have a clean process and define a clean process to get to that clean output. So definitely like a really key piece to consider right there. I think additionally, we talked around, so there's the individual kind of skills that get QA'd, but then there's the skills where we're releasing out to the entire company. But in between those, there's a second layer. So we have a 3-layered governance structure. So you have individual skills that people can go and pull from if they've passed an internal QA and add them to your agent. The next year, before it would get to something that we just roll out to the whole company, would be role or department skills, skill packs. And so if I'm in sales, we have a sales skills pack. If we're in operations, or specifically, let's say, I'm in managed services, there's a managed services skill pack versus a project delivery skill pack. So we've recognized that there has to be a middle ground too between, an individual task plus, hey, everybody gets it. And so ultimately what we're trying to prevent is, people have just the skills that they actually need, plus the freedom to provide some individualization to themselves without having bloat of tons of skills that are irrelevant to them, because the more skills and the more tools that you get, the higher chance that you have for inaccurate tool calls or inaccurate skills calls. So we're trying to balance all of these three things together kind of with that approach. So to kind of like dive deeper, one of the things that we wanted to look at was one specific skill, that we've developed. I think this is a really good one because, this isn't really dependent on any external tools. This is almost an entirely process-driven tool or skill, I should say. It's also, a lot of people think of skills as one markdown file, but actually a skill is a folder structure, usually with a skill.md file, which is the main guidance. But then you can have associated files or a references folder within that skills folder that gives it even more specific context based on specific scenarios. And so this skill actually uses this. I love this skill. One of our account directors came up with this. He's aligned to a lot of our largest clients where they're really focused on, or where he's responsible for aligning with executives at the executive level for roadmaps, demonstrating long-term value, et cetera. This skill really takes a process that we've had really well defined for some time, but has had a lot of manual pieces to it around business value analysis. So assessing business value on a digital transformation engagement. We're a consulting company that implements Salesforce and AI agents for customers, right? And so one of the key things we have to do is demonstrate the business value and prove out the business value of the solutions that we've actually implemented. So we develop the framework in sales, but then we maintain it throughout an engagement, and then we assess it after we've released solutions out to a customer. So these are really, really important for us. And really, really important for our customers because we have to have accurate business value assessments and strong frameworks that actually do help prove the value that we're providing, because that's what's going to want our clients to continue to work with us. If we're providing business value, they're going to want to continue to work with us. So really critical skill. So we developed John, our director here, he developed our business value assessment builder. It actually creates, refines, and maps the business value assessments from an engagement and actually proves, and maps from the statement of work in terms of what we do, the spend that a customer has to a defined business outcome or result, and gives this in an executive level facing format that allows us to present these to executives. So we have human in the loop to evaluate, but it has a very specific process, a very specific output. Again, this is a very output-driven skill, and it works all with tools that we already have. We have a Google Workspace MCP that we already use. You can connect Google Workspace to Claude Code, Codex. You can build your own as they publish their CLI. There's a lot of different ways you can interact with Google Workspace. That's a separate topic. But we don't really have to have any intermediaries in terms of this skill as well. So it kind of maybe take us a bit deeper. That's a little bit overview of the skill, Gavin, but kind of, and we'll provide an example of the skill with the meeting notes as well. So you can actually go and look at it in a GitHub repo and see how it's structured, how it's output focused, et cetera, to kind of give you some keys, in terms of how you could do something similar for your business. But Gavin, you want to take it to the next level here? Kind of what are some key things that stand out with the skill and why it's been valuable?
Yeah. So I think something really powerful about this skill is it has connections to a lot of our external services, but you can manipulate it to work almost 100% locally. So typically when we fire this skill, instruct the agent to build us a BVA, then typically it's going to ask for a few different optional things. First, it's going to say, do you have a spreadsheet idea already? And this is all covered within the MD file. So whatever LLM you're using is understanding, okay, this is the flow of questions I need to ask and what I need to do with the content provided. So it's going to ask for existing BVA. It's going to ask for an SOW for the client. Obviously, when you're building out a business value assessment, SOW is a really important piece to that. And also may ask, what's the client name? What's the vertical industry? And then it may ask for transcripts on some of the pre-sales activities or whatever it is you're doing specifically for that client at whatever phase they're at. And then the output, there's quite a few different outputs here. So first thing it's going to do is it's going to create an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, whatever tool you hook up to it. And it's going to build a multi-tabbed sheet. So things like executive priorities, goals, objectives, capabilities, and finally metrics. So something that we oftentimes as consultants that is incredibly core to our business, being able to communicate the value of what it is that we're building to the executives at a high level. It's able to spit that out with some of the inputs that we provided there. Additionally, it'll reach out and deposit that sheet into whatever storage that we have. And I think one of the really powerful things about this skill, it has the ability to create formula fields in Salesforce. We're a Salesforce implementation company at the core. So if we want tracking of these metrics, we can actually do so within the Salesforce orgs that we're implementing, which is really powerful. Really long thing for somebody to build. It takes a long time to get all of that set up. So to just be able to knock or at least have a human in the loop first pass at this, really, really powerful for our business.
Yeah. And this is an example where it is human agent collaboration because you have to have a lot of industry knowledge, experience, a lot of reps under your belt in terms of like having done this, because we had to provide to make this actually work and be useful for our people. We had to really put in a lot to this in terms of processes that we've been defining over the last 3 years since we started doing kind of more formal business value assessments. So we actually have, when we say within the skill, it's a folder and you have references with it. And you'll see this in the genericized GitHub repo that we share. We actually have 5 critical reference documents that help feed into the skill itself. So we actually provide examples of what right looks like for a really good business value assessment. So we took one business value assessment that's formatted really the way we like to do it. And then we include that with the skill so the model and the agent can always reference that to know what right looks like. We actually define and have a lexicon in a schema for key terms, key fields, key things that need to be identified, and how we define different things throughout a business value assessment. So it's actually using our language, how we define things and referring to things the same way that we actually do as a business. We actually created it, and it has an industry checklist as well. So specific industries have really common patterns in terms of business value, in terms of the industries that we commonly work with. And so we had to take that industry knowledge and feed that in so the model can actually reference those rather than having to go come up with it on its own. This is all helping get us to fine-tuned results that actually work. So then we can use this consistently without having to go rewrite a lot of what the skill comes up with, that the agent comes up with. Next is a set of quality checks that need to happen. So what are some key things that always have to pass before we're ready to give this to human review? And then again, more examples, but different types of examples. So Gavin, you referenced the Salesforce formulas that we could create. We actually provide a lot of patterns of effective Salesforce formulas that work for different types of metrics from ones that we've done in the past as well. So again, the more domain specific knowledge to that skill and process knowledge and definition that you can give, the better that skill is going to be. And that's not just for the agent, but also better for people across your organization. So if somebody's actually working on a business value assessment, I don't need to go maintain a COE and a skill anymore. I can just maintain the skill, because if I have a question on something, I'm just going to go ask the Cirrius Ops agent, how do we do this in our business value assessment process? So now we have one thing that we have to maintain as an organization, but it actually forced us to even go a level deeper in terms of process and documentation than we've ever had before. So it's actually just across multiple facets, kind of hardening the organization in terms of what we're doing. And so really excited about what this is doing across the board for the company. So yeah, that was one example. I guess, Gavin, anything else to touch on with this skill before we kind of wrap up?
Just that it's at its core very tied to our business process, which is really powerful. That's something that we, that's what we're really pushing for here, is the idea that these skills can be really tied in with how you do business. But we'll be sharing a more universal version of this skill for business value assessment in the repo.
Yep, absolutely. So just to kind of recap things that we covered today, we talked a little bit about what skills are. We then talked and shared some examples of skills that we're using internally for our Cirrius Ops agent, which is our employee agent, just to give kind of a sense of these have been massive value unlocks for those that we've rolled the Cirrius Ops agent out to so far. Then we actually look at a governance structure. So you have 3 tiers. You have to have a way to organize your skills so skills don't become the Wild West as you transition from being an SOP or COE-based company to a skill-based company. And with that, we recommend a 3-tiered structure where you have an individual repo with some type of QA check, a department or roles-based tier 2 set of repos or skills packs, so people can go and download things specific to their domain that they work in within the company. And then finally, you have your base pack in terms of what all employees across your company should have in terms of skills. And that 3-tiered structure with QA in there gives you a really good way to have a scalable, maintainable way to govern and manage skills across your organization as you're going through all this change. Then we went in and looked at a very specific skill, business value assessment, builder. It's been a great skill for us. We love using it. Our whole leadership team has gotten a lot of use out of this. Our account management team has as well. And so we'll provide a genericized version of that, but really kind of just giving you a look under the hood of like what a very industry and domain specific skill actually looks like when people are talking about this, to kind of give you a taste of kind of what kind of involved in terms of building something like that for your company. So hopefully this is helpful. I think this is really where a lot of 2026 is going to be focused for businesses. A lot of businesses are starting to shift into this already. How do we roll these skills out? How do we support human agent collaboration across the business? How do we stop from having to maintain things in a million places and have to maintain them in one place? These kind of frameworks or lessons kind of help solve a lot of those. So hopefully this is helpful for a lot of business leaders out there going through similar journeys.
Man, this is incredible, guys. My background's engineering. Tim knows this. I'm constantly looking for the boogeyman around the corner. What about? The phrase that really echoes in my mind is one time pain, many time gain. If you don't do this, what's the result? The result is your people become the Wild West, right? Everybody's got their own way of doing things. So if you want to manage a team or a process effectively, there has to be some rules. There has to be a way that we do things, whether that's writing emails or whatever those things might look like. There's a standard you want to set. So for you guys to really close the curtain, go behind the scenes and start breaking out what these things are, you're creating a standard, a target for the rest of us to aim at. Now, as any individual engagement manager, whatever, I can go do things in my way. And it just becomes the stuff that I'm feeding into the agent and all the beauty things that make that standard happen there. So yes, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of thought to go into setting that stuff up. But if you take the time to do that once, everybody in the organization is going to benefit. As opposed to if you don't do this, everybody's going to pay the price for not having done it you're going to spend that time. You're just going to do it cleaning up and trying to understand what the wild, wild west people are doing. I hope people got that taken away. I know the document does a great job of kind of breaking some of these things out. This feels probably as close to base roots things that people can take away and start really having conversations around it of anything we've done yet. I appreciate the effort to not just what you're doing internally, because I can see how it's creating standards here at Cirrius, but this is something any company should walk away with and be inspired by what they can do with it. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. Again, Tim mentioned the things we'll have in the show notes. If there's any questions, any follow-up, there's a link in there on how to get in contact with us. We would absolutely love to sit down with you and talk about it some more. So gentlemen, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
That's it for today's episode of Cirrius Talk. Thanks again for joining us. If this episode helped you think more clearly about local agents, skills, and governance, here's your call to action. Share this episode with a business leader or technical owner who's struggling to turn AI experimentation into repeatable execution. If you're getting value from this series, please follow or subscribe and leave a positive 5-star review wherever you enjoy your podcast. We also dropped a link to the artifact mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. Be sure to check that out. And if you have any questions or want to talk through this topic with us, reach out to us at CirriusTalk@CirriusSolutions.com. There's a link in the show notes. Finally, a big thank you to Jason Fowler for allowing us to use his song, Mystery Road. Until next time, I'm Greg Banks. We'll see you soon.